Welcome back for the next exciting, hopefully exciting, installment of building information modeling. And kind of give you an overview of some of the things we're going to be doing today, just so you get a big roadmap of how this is all going to come together. There you go. All right. We will be covering a couple different big topics today. I want to look at walls a little bit more. We're actually just going to keep on developing some of our skills, ultimately with all the kind of fundamental pieces that you're going to need to go through and complete the buildings for the assignment. Right after class, lab hours are going to start. So if you have problems, stick around and TAs will be helping you with some of that kind of stuff. We'll just kind of put a sign-up list on the board for that. But in terms of what we're going to be covering in class today, we're going to keep on looking at the whole issue of walls just a little bit. And in terms of walls, we're going to be looking at a couple specific aspects. We're going to be looking at what I'll call just openings in walls and really custom openings. And some of the things that we can do to walls, just kind of adjust them beyond just sort of putting doors and windows in them. So to give you a little more customization in terms of what's going on. We're also going to be looking at the whole issue of curtain walls. And curtain walls are really a very rich and interesting topic all unto themselves. But we want to give you some flexibility about being able to work with them. Carry your own. Okay. After we go ahead and look at walls, we want to look primarily at the whole issue of floors and roofs, which are actually very, very similar in a lot of different ways. We're going to look at floors in terms of the whole notion of really how we work with the boundary of a floor to define a floor, and the elevation of the floor, things like that. But we're also going to look at the whole notion of really just how we do openings in the floor. And the good news is that what we did up here for openings and what we're going to do for floor openings are really very, very similar. It's kind of the same basic procedure. Same sort of thing with roof. With roofs, we talk about them, we don't talk about the boundary, we call it the footprint, but it's essentially the same concept, really tracing some sort of boundary, which is the outline of the roof. But then we're going to go ahead and look at the whole issue of, it's just different ways you can control the slope and which of the different surfaces actually come up to meet the peak of the roof and how you can kind of control the geometry. So it's kind of the slope and the geometry. With any luck, we will also get to you what I hope will be the last topic today, which is a little bit more on schedules. And really, within the notion of schedules, what I want to show you is just how you create the basic schedules, a door schedule, a window schedule, things like that. But also, how we go through, there's two sort of main things that you want to be able to do to enhance a schedule. One is the notion of adding some sort of subtotal to it, some sort of grand total to it, but being able to go through and put some sort of tabulator that will go through and do the math for you. And the other is going ahead and embedding some sort of a formula in the schedule so that, as opposed to just reporting the values that has it built into the database, you can kind of compute your own things, just whatever it is you need. Okay, so relatively full agenda, but I think we'll be able to get through most of it. So you ready? Okay, if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go ahead and you can either open up your model if you want to work on that, the one that you're working on for the assignment, or I'm just going to open up a brand new model and kind of start with that. But let's kind of meet here in the middle somewhere. I will say new, go for the architectural template, and I'm going to start with this whole notion of walls and wall openings and kind of build my way into curtain walls. So walls, we've sort of, that's getting to be an old hat topic right now. We all know about walls, so we won't spend too much time kind of belaboring the beginning. We'll go there and choose some sort of wall type. We can choose the type of the wall over here. I'll go ahead and just choose some sort of type that has a little bit of interest to it. I'll go for brick on metal instead, something that has just a little bit of complexity to it in terms of the layering. And then we can go through and start drawing our walls. And again, for drawing our walls, no problem. We can just either kind of sketch them out in any sort of form. How about if I do something a little bit interesting? I've just been sort of drawing these straight line segments. If I want to use any of the other tools, for example, I can draw arcs to the walls, I can fill up the walls together if I want to round off the corner. I can draw walls that have all sorts of interesting geometry, straight or circular walls, or walls that have some sort of inscribed or circumscribed geometry. I'm just kind of I'll draw an arc. I'll draw that wall there. Oops, I didn't draw an arc. Control Z out of there. I'll choose the arc tool, which is right there, and draw this across to there. And I can pull that out if I want it to be like a full circle, or kind of leave it a little bit shallower as an arc. Actually, as I've been drawing the walls, you'll notice I've sort of been sloppy about this in that I didn't actually go through and pay much attention to the height of the walls. Those are going up to this unconnected height of 20 feet. Probably not the best choice, so let me just go ahead and fix that. I'm going to want to make them all go just to level 2. That'll be a little bit stronger. I can choose them all individually. Control-click to get a bunch of them. Okay. Or what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over that first one. And again, one of my favorite tricks is just hover over the first one and then ever so delicately with one finger tap the tab key to get everything. Okay. And then click to select them all. So again, don't hold, just kind of do that tap on the tab. And we're going to do a lot of tapping on the tab key today, so get used to that. Just kind of tap it. Once you have that, we can go through and say, great, the common properties, they're all unconnected right now, and instead I'll change them all going up to level 2. Okay, let me open up a 3D view so you can sort of see that. And we're looking not too bad. So as we go working with these walls, we could go through and place doors and windows. You've been doing that. So grab some doors and windows and place them in here. And that's good for a lot of different types of openings. But, you know, doors and windows aren't everything. There's other things you want to do to the walls besides doing that. And let me kind of introduce 2 classic ones to you. One is this whole notion of either nipping the corner or rounding it off or somehow giving it a different top constraint or a bottom constraint, not just level top or bottom, but actually, you know, following some other sort of geometry. Okay, and we'll look at how we can do things like this, and that might be useful for, there might be sort of an exterior wing wall where we want to follow the slope of a hill, or we often use walls like this next to stairways. So as opposed to having the wall go all the way up, we have the wall follow the same slope as the stairway. Try to work with that. So we can do things like this. You'll also recognize that that kind of shape often is the same sort of wall that connects to the bottom of a roof. Okay, a gable in the wall. The other thing we can do is sort of cut holes in walls. Not that have windows in them, not that have glass in them, but just kind of any arbitrary shape. And both these things work very, very similarly, and actually very similarly to some of the things later on in terms of openings. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at about something called the wall's profile. And the wall's profile is the boundary of the wall. We often don't look at the profile because we just look at drawing the line of the wall and having the wall jump up. But the profile of the wall is very much like the boundary of the floor. It is just the outer bounds of where it's going to go through and kind of create positive wall surface. So let's show you how you expose that, because typically it's kind of hidden from you, but there's power in being able to see it. So here's the deal. If I go to any wall at all, and let me go through, and maybe I'll do this in an elevation view to start with, because that might be a little bit easier. I could do it in 3D, but it might help to sort of flatten it out at first, just so you don't kind of get confused by the 3D aspect of it. So I'm looking at the end of the building here, just kind of from the right-hand side. So I got this wall. Okay, and that wall is kind of looking okay. It's kind of got a flat top, a flat bottom. One of the things that's available to us when we choose the wall in the Modify Wall tools is we can actually edit the profile. That will make the boundary accessible to us. And if you choose that, what'll happen is it'll expose that boundary. You'll sort of see what the pink line boundary is that's defining that. So, not too bad. That's where it's actually creating a positive wall. If we want to change that boundary, what we can do is actually just sort of draw any sort of new boundary in here. So we can draw straight line segments, we can fill up the corners, we can do an awful lot of different things to that. So for example, if I want to nip off the corner, just kind of do it at some sort of slope, what I can do is choose the line tool, kind of draw some sort of slope in here, okay? And we're pretty close to what we need. Okay. What I'm going to try and do is get rid of that part up there. Now for all these boundaries, the important issue is that it's going to create positive geometry in the enclosed boundary of the region. And by the boundary, it likes a closed loop. It doesn't like any intersections. It doesn't like any overhangs. It doesn't like things that stop short. It really needs to be sort of an enclosed loop. So This is pretty good as an enclosed loop, but there's some extra stuff kind of hanging out over here. So we want to get rid of the excess. And how we get rid of that, we got a couple of different options. We can choose a line, kind of drag that back. And if I get real good, I can actually pull that all the way back to here. And it'll snap, hopefully, really nicely. But what I want to show you is sort of a better way to get rid of things because it has a little more precision to it. Dragging and getting it to land just right, if you're lucky, it works that way. But a much better way that you'll learn to start using is something called the trim tool, which is actually right here in the Modify tab. So if you have a line selected, you'll see there's a trim tool. Actually, I think it's even there if it's not selected. But trim has a shortcut TR, so if you ever hear me saying TR trim, that's what I'm referring to. Just get the tool. And here's the way the trim tool works. It's actually kind of intuitive, but if you've been doing a lot of drafting with AutoCAD, it's backwards the way you think it should work. Okay, so trim works like this. If I want to keep this segment of the wall and that segment of the wall, I click on the parts I want to keep. Always select the parts you want to keep. So as I'm trying to trim this off, as I'm making this corner, clicking here and here will do what I want. Clicking here and here will do sort of backwards from what I want. Okay, so what I want to do is click on this one and then click on that one. Order's not important, and it'll trim it the way I think it should. Let me undo that, Control Z. If you aren't kind of paying attention to the order, often you'll get this sort of thing and it trims the wrong side, and it's just order dependent, or it's side dependent. Always click on what you want to keep. And that's the only important rule you need to remember there. So trim there and there, and I can trim here and here. Okay. I got a good looking boundary now. It's kind of all complete. There's nothing excess hanging out. If I don't have a good looking boundary and I try to finish it, it will say, hey, I'm not liking something here. It's overhanging. It'll try to highlight for you whatever's wrong. But we're just going to go, let me give you an illustration of that. For example, this is not a good looking boundary. They got that excess piece in there. So here's what happens. If you got some excess, when you try to finish, it'll say, those lines have to be in a closed loop, and this piece doesn't look like it fits. Okay, so no worries. You just say continue and get rid of it. But get yourself a nice closed loop, and when you do have that closed loop, hit the finish, and with any luck, you have something that looks like that. Okay, so you can sort of slope any wall. You can go through and do this manually. We're going to teach you eventually, when we talk about roofs, a way to do this automatically to get sort of the walls to adapt to the slope of the roof for you, so you don't have to go through and kind of do that manually. But you can trim them in any way you want. So let me just kind of show you some other ways. It'll work in 3D also. Hopefully this won't be too confusing, but if I choose that and say edit the profile, that is the rectangular profile, just kind of shown in a 3D view. But I can do the same sort of things, like a tool that I use sometimes over here is called the fillet arc. I can take that and this and just kind of round the two corners. Okay, not just fillet them. And again, it's going to create some positive geometry. And wait, we're never out of seats in this room. If we're out of seats, see if you can steal one from next door, but we have to put it back. Please make yourself at home. How did that happen? We never run out of seats. So, hence we don't never. Okay, so if we round that off, we can kind of make a wall. Oops, that's interesting. It's complaining. It doesn't quite like something there. Let me say unjoin it. I think what it's a little unhappy about, it must be something about the join of this wall to that wall. It's a little unhappy because what used to be this nice mitered corner now is all rounded off, and it can't figure out how to miter exactly. We could also edit that and just put holes in the wall. So the boundary will always create positive geometry. If you go through and put an interior boundary, that'll subtract space. Okay, and that's going to come in useful here, here, here. Whenever you want to put an opening in something, you take the outer boundary and you put a hole inside of it, and it'll subtract space out. Okay. So similarly, I could do just pretty much any shape I want. If I want a triangular opening, I can just sort of draw a triangle on there. Okay, and that'll hopefully cut a hole in there. So it tends to be pretty easy, but let me tell you about the part that doesn't work. Okay, we have to watch out for when we're doing this technique. And that is as follows. As you go through and edit the profile, so far so good, not too awfully bad. What it doesn't like is anything overlapping or hanging out. It really likes these closed loops. So, for example, if you do this, okay, that's unhappy. Okay, it's not going to like that because it's got some sort of intersection. Ultimately, it's just not sure what to do with that. Is it positive, is it negative, and what should it be? So we got to decide, okay, what do I want? Do I want a tab or do I want a notch? Whatever it is. And just clean up the line work to make that work. So cleaning up the line work, that can actually work out pretty easily. Let me kind of show you, again, sort of some tricks that will help you with that. Because really what I want to do is, let's say I'm going to make it a tab as opposed to a notch. To do it the other way. But I'm going to want to kind of clean up this line and just make it a loop as opposed to kind of this overlapping line geometry. So here's the rub. I can take my little trim tool and I can trim this against that or whatever I'm trying to do. But you'll see the problem is it not only sort of trimmed it here, we kind of lost the back end of the geometry too. Okay, so we might need to do something else first. Similarly on this side, I can trim here to here, and I'm sort of losing more than I want. So when you're doing your boundary work and you're trimming things and just trying to get it all cleaned up, realize that every once in a while you'll need to split a line so that when you trim away parts, you don't lose everything. You just lose the part that you want to get rid of. So how that would work is there's a split tool right here in Modify again. And I can X-Acto knife that line just to split it into two separate pieces. That'll now allow me to trim it from both sides. So I can trim it to this side. And I can also trim it to that side. Okay. Looking pretty good. About the only thing still left to fix is that excess piece that's hanging around in there. Just get rid of it. Can now have, it's starting to look like a pumpkin. In honor of Halloween. Okay, so you can really get very arbitrary around this. I'm not advocating that you get really arbitrary around this, but you have some flexibility in terms of what you want to do. In fact, over here, for my architects who are hanging around in the room and thinking they want to do really exotic things, I can do all sorts of things, even like these funny splines. So I can pull up and down and up and down and really kind of create any sort of zigzaggy thing that I want to. And we'll go through and create that. So you really get complete customization over the walls if you want to. Okay, hopefully that kind of makes sense. It's really just sort of a good general principle in terms of this notion of changing the profile or changing the boundary, either adding or extending or cutting holes in it. It's actually useful for everything we're going to be doing today because it's that same basic technique. Whenever we get into boundary mode and we're editing a boundary, the same basic techniques apply. Okay, let's pause there for just a second. Does that kind of make sense? How's that feeling? Pretty good? Yes?
I just have a question. I forgot. What was the initial command to start cutting out?
What you do is just choose a wall, and then in the wall tools, it's kind of short on my screen, there's actually a Modify Walls tab. It's Edit Profile. Okay? And that'll make the boundary of the wall available. Now I'm going to get the side wall on this side. Okay, so always just choose it and edit the profile. The other command sitting right next door that you might notice is attach the top or the base of the wall or detach it. Hold that thought, because that's going to come in real handy after we start creating some roofs. Because what we'd love to do is be able to say, hey, I don't just want to draw that profile. I'd actually like to follow the profile of some other element like a roof and let it do it for me. Okay, so we're going to get to that. That's coming up. Okay. The other variation on walls I want to leave you with is just the whole notion of a curtain wall and actually how curtain walls work. So let me just kind of switch around to another side of the model and we'll kind of make some things curtain walls. Curtain walls are really just another type of wall. So this is a brick wall, it has thickness, all that stuff. We can actually go through and choose curtain wall types too. And when we talk about curtain walls in this way, there's really sort of two variations of curtain walls you need to know about. Actually, I'm going to switch over the slides for a second. Some curtain walls are defined as a pattern that you apply very, very systematically. So when we talk about the curtain wall and how it should be divided up, we specify everything in terms of just what the grid spacing should be vertically, what the grid spacing should be horizontally. We just sort of give a formula for how it should generate that, and no matter where we put it, it'll just repeat that formula and do it automatically for you. The other way you could do it is you could actually just start with a big old blank sheet of glass, and you manually put in where you want the grids to be and what the pattern's going to be, and kind of completely customize it. Okay. Somewhere in the middle, you get to that thing where it's mostly the same, but you want a little bit of customization of it. Okay. And you can build those too. The trick is you just got to decide, is it easier to generate the pattern first and take out things and adjust it, or is it easier to start from scratch and get to there? You can kind of go at it either way. In the end, you're going to end up in the same place. So let me show you the patterny way first. That's the easy way that a lot of people will use. I'd probably go for that unless you really have some very custom pattern that you're trying to achieve. But then you have to customize it. Okay, so let's just start with the notion of kind of a pretty basic curtain wall. And to do that, let's switch back on over. Let me zoom this thing into view, and we'll change some of our walls. So I'll zoom on over here. If I, for example, want to choose that wall, you'll see that I have all these great wall types to work with. The exterior wall types, the generic wall types, all that stuff's available. But one of the choices that you don't see immediately, but it's down there, is actually some curtain wall choices. Let's talk about them. Because there are 3 different types of curtain walls defined right there. Actually, it's just a curtain wall with different parameters sort of specifying the pattern a little bit differently. But they vary from, if you choose the curtain wall 1 type, it's a big old blank sheet of glass. Let me change that to colored so you can sort of see that. So give it a little bit of color so you can sort of spot it. It's a big old sheet of glass, which is an okay starting point for the design. You aren't probably going to build it that way because 20-foot tall, 80-foot long pieces of glass are hard to come by and expensive and dangerous and all that kind of stuff. So, that's just kind of a starting point. The second type that's been predefined is something called exterior glazing. Exterior glazing, well, that's kind of looking a little interesting. You zoom on in there, you'll see that, well, okay, it looks like it has panels to it. Somehow this wall is divided up into a series of just very regular panels. It doesn't have any mullions to it. It doesn't have any aluminum framing to it to help hold the glass. And this is actually, though, a common detail in a lot of parts of Asia and a lot of parts of the world where you want that very kind of clean appearance. We do glass like this. We just have sealant between the glass, and it actually looks pretty well. It's not very common in the US. In the US, we tend to put all these big aluminum mullions between everything. So that's the third type that's in here, is what's called storefront. And storefront's really just a name, but that just sort of puts the big mullions in there, and we can go through and customize all those things. So all these types are really just defined by patterns. If we look at the wall, you'll see the pattern actually has, or the wall, the curtain wall has a couple different sort of parameters that you can adjust. One of the ones that's kind of interesting, these are also the same, top and bottom, that's kind of all about the same. But one of the pattern choices that are sort of interesting is the notion of, should you put an angle on the grid? By default, everything is perfectly horizontal and perfectly vertical. A lot of newer buildings sort of play around with that, though. So if you, for example, want to have those verticals not be vertical, you can put some sort of dimension in there, like 15 degrees. It'll rotate them over for you. Okay, so just programmatically it's doing that. If you want to, you can do the same thing with the horizontals. It's going to be hard to build, but you can change those things just pattern-wise, and that's kind of A-okay. I tend not to mess around with those too much, though. I'm going to go back to zeros. But they're available there as your design freedom goes. Just so you know, this other thing, the justification, let me tell you what that's all about. If you happen to have a panel, let's see if this one is true. This actually looks like it matched pretty well. If you have a panel size where the wall has turned out to be an odd increment of the panel size, sometimes you have these little leftovers at the end. All the panels are 5 feet long, but you have that extra 2 feet. So the question is, do you want to see that in terms of the whole panels justified to the beginning of the wall, the end of the wall, or do you want to sort of split the difference and have that 2 feet, 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other side? So, yeah, you probably won't run into that too much in your design, but that's what that parameter is all about. You get the choice of if there's any left over where you want to put it. Okay. In terms of these pattern-based walls, if you like storefront or you like exterior glazing, whatever it is that you like, and you want to change something so that, you know, it's similar, but it's not quite what I had in mind. I don't really want, well, let's see, take a look at what this is. If I take a look at the storefront type and edit it, you'll see it's a 5-foot vertical spacing on the verticals, an 8-foot spacing on the horizontals. If that's what I want, super. But if I want to change it, I want a 3-foot spacing or a 4-foot spacing, or 10-foot, whatever it is. What you do is like we do with a lot of things where the parameters aren't exactly what we have in mind. We'd like to kind of customize it a little bit. What you'll do is create a new type, okay, that has your parameters in it instead. So the way we always do that, whether it was a door or a window or now a curtain wall, is we duplicate. I'll call it storefront again. Oh, what? Maybe I'll make them 3 feet wide by 10 feet tall. Now, that's just a name so I can spot it in the menu, but I can put it in here 3 feet, 10 feet in there. Actually, I should take a look at these in terms of what's going on. Let me make them both fixed distance. There's some choices in here, and this is, again, you can sort of determine things about the pattern. Do you want them to be a fixed distance, as when you say 3 feet, they are going to be 3 feet? Do you want to be a fixed number, as in no matter how big the wall is, I want 10 panels in there. You grow or shrink the panels to put 10 panels in there. Minimum maximum spacing, that's kind of the idea that if you do want to break it up, yeah, how big could they get? Like maximum spacing 36 would say that if the panels sort of turn out to be 30, if they turn out to be 33 or 35, that's okay. But they can be up to 36. If it gets to be over 36, make another whole increment. Okay, so that gives you a little flexibility. But I'm going to do fixed distance right now because that's a pretty easy one to understand. Oops. I don't get it yet. Say OK. And what you can see is the wall panel just changed. So, as we go moving around in changing these things, let me put that one, let me unjoin that, that's fine. Put this back to, I'll make that storefront, and the other one storefront 3 by 10. You can sort of see the two side by side. And yeah, you can go through and change things as you need to. Go and change that to be storefront 3 by 10. Change the rotation, whatever it is. Now that didn't do a very good job of joining in the corner. I'll warn you about that. Generally, these things should do a nice job of joining in the corner, and I think it's because I changed the type over from, yeah, no, it looks like it's kind of joined. I'm still not really happy with that join. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to pull it back a little. Let's see if I can rejoin it. It still doesn't look very good. That's a little bit better in terms of what's going on. I got that little odd end now at the end. So this is that whole thing. Do I want it to be at the beginning or the end? Or to split the difference in terms of wherever that break is. But in general, curtain panels do a pretty good job of joining themselves together. In fact, let me just kind of show you that. I think this is a little fussier because I kind of created them after the fact. But if I'm choosing wall and curtain walls, they're generally pretty smart. If I go drawing here to here to here, it'll generally do a really nice job of actually bringing all the corners together and doing kind of the right thing there, putting a corner mullion in there and all that stuff. Okay. So pattern-based curtain walls, they get you, most of what you'll do, you'll be able to do with pattern-based curtain walls. Okay. Customization, let's talk about that. That's the other side of it, and kind of show you the good, the bad, and the ugly about customization, but also the power of it. So let's kind of talk about that. I'll get rid of this guy over here and say, I'm instead going to go through and put in a curtain wall but I'm going to put it in just as a big old piece of glass. So here's my curtain wall. Now, putting in big old pieces of glass, yeah, it's a good starting point. We're going to learn how to break that up a lot in terms of different things that are happening. And we're going to talk about where you get in trouble sometimes. Once you put in that big old piece of glass, if you want to start subdividing it to kind of create your own pattern, there are actually some tools. There's a curtain grid tool and a mullion tool available on the architecture tab. And if you want to use them to break things up, you choose curtain grid. And I can just hover over the glass and at some spacing, just kind of introduce some breaks. I could also introduce breaks kind of horizontally too. It's whatever pattern you have in mind. Okay? And we can start building the pattern that we want. So breaking it up and gridding it this way, it tends to work out pretty good as you're going. We can add breaks across the entire piece of glass. So for example, with that curtain grid, I can say all segments. That'll make it go across the entire surface. I can say one segment. One segment does this. It's a sort of neat option where what it'll do is, as you hover, it'll just break a small piece of it. Okay, so I can sort of break this one up. I can even subdivide that one. But you can really create the very custom pattern you want to have on there. So it's really just a matter of breaking it up. So let's zoom on in there. Again, what I'm doing is just under the curtain grid, either all segments that'll cut across the entire surface, or one segment that'll just sort of split the difference. It'll only do a little piece of it. Okay? And I can start creating these very custom patterns. Now the cool thing is, okay, it's looking pretty much like a curtain wall. It's getting close anyway. We might still have to add some mullions, still just a bunch of broken up glass. Okay? If I want to add the mullions, there's this mullion tool which lets you do that. And I could either choose to add things along a grid line, a specific segment, or everything. So you might start by just adding it to specific lines. We could actually apply different types of mullions, different sizes and dimensions, round ones versus square ones, different kind of lines within there. We can really build it up however we want to. But what I often do just to get started, and for your very quick design as you're getting going, you might just start with just all grid lines, just apply the same mullion to really all the conditions. Just kind of pop some on there very quickly. And again, if we don't like that, we can go back and customize it later. But you know, for a quick design, this might be sufficient. I'll just choose all grid lines, click on the wall anywhere, and they all get it really quickly. Okay, so let's stop there. So far, so good? You got the idea of kind of taking a piece of glass and breaking it up? Okay. Let's show you the couple of cases that get you in trouble that you need to know about, which are, I'll go ahead and create that nice wall. Curtain wall 1. I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a curved wall. Okay. So as opposed to creating a straight wall, I'm going to create a wall, and I've learned I can create curved walls just by drawing arcs, so I'm going to put that out here. I'm going to kind of curve that out. Okay. And that wall is going to try to curve itself, but it's not able to do it. And here's the deal. As a big old flat piece of glass, it just can't curve itself. At least it's pretty hard to get it to do that. And I used to say you couldn't get curved glass in big old sheets like that. If you have enough money, you can. Okay, there's always that. But in general, most of us can't afford to get big pieces of curved glass. Okay. So here's what we got to do. When you have big old curved surfaces like that, what we have to do is, we can't do it as a single piece of glass wrapping around. We have to put some breaks in it. And as we break it, it'll then go ahead and sort of follow the curve a little more closely. So what that looks like is, with curtain grids, if I hover over that wall, you'll see it understands. It sort of knows that it wants to be curved. If I put a single break, it'll do that. If I put another break in, it'll get a little finer. Oh, come on, you. Where are you, Mr. Grids? I'm going to put it over there. It's easier to see. I'm a little oblique to it right now. But the finer I break that up, the better it's going to do a job of like rounding the curve. Now the cool thing is, if you're using a pattern-based curtain wall and the panels are small enough, okay, it'll take care of all that breaking for you. It just follows the curve automatically. But watch out for that. If you're doing a custom one, watch out for your curved surfaces because you may have to kind of break them up to go ahead and get them there. But if you're trying to create a curved surface, yeah, that's what's going on. So again, wall, if I do the pattern-based one, that should follow the curve pretty well. Because at only 3-foot panels, it can follow the curvature. Those panels are small enough they can actually get around there. Okay, so you got this choice of kind of build them up from scratch or kind of do them pattern-wise. But let's talk about the hybrid of the two. Because here's the deal. If I have this wall over here and it's got all these 3-foot segments, and honestly, that's going to be pretty good for about 90% of what I'm doing. And I'm just going to start making some changes to that. Okay? Maybe I'm going to sort of, put something at the bottom and break it off in a different material or do some sort of alternating pattern to it. Okay? I might start with a pattern-based curtain wall, then enhance it. Okay, so here's how you do that. I'll just go zooming on in there. And come on in here. Even though I'm looking at that pattern-based wall, I can use the curtain grid tool to go ahead and add things to it. Okay, so I can break it up a little further. If I say the one segment, because I don't want to do it across, if I do all segments, it'll make a break across the entire wall. If I do one segment, I can sort of break that one, then break that one, maybe that one. I could even, whatever it is, as I want to subdivide it. Just decide really whether it's going to be easier to start and add to it, or whether it's going to be easier to start from scratch. Either way sort of works. You sort of end up at about the same place. And that actually works out pretty well. One of the few things you have to worry about, though, relative to doing this is, though, pattern-based walls actually have the items that were generated by the pattern pinned so that you can't change them easily. Because that is, if they were generated by the pattern, you don't want to accidentally sort of start messing with the pattern. Let me show you what I mean. If, for example, I got this nice pattern-based curtain wall over here, and there's like a vertical mullion here, if I want to get rid of that. Okay. In any other wall, if it wasn't generated by a pattern, I could delete it and it would be gone. Okay. Because it actually came out of the pattern, okay, you see it has this little pin associated with it. And what's that all about? That's just saying that, okay, that wasn't just something you arbitrarily put there. That's there for a purpose. So if you want to get rid of it, no problem, we can. But I'm going to make you unpin it, just to kind of give me an explicit acknowledgement that you really do want to make that change. Got one we can get while Raj is doing that one? Okay, no worries. So I can unpin this thing. If I unpin it, then I can go ahead and take it back out. So there's always this notion with any pattern-based one, if you want to change it, you might have to unpin it. Now, these other ones, these ones that I added, like this one here, I guess since it's part of the pattern-based wall, it's going to be pinned now too. If I want to get rid of it, I can unpin it and take it out. Now, I've been taking out the mullions. Turns out the grid is still there, so we might have to get rid of the grid also too, because the mullion and the grid line are really two separate things as far as it's concerned. And how do you get rid of a grid? It looks like this. You come on over here, you choose the grid. Let me warn you about this. This is where your tab key is going to come in handy. Curtain walls are actually made up of all these different pieces. There's the overall curtain wall. There is this series of different panels on the curtain wall. There are grid lines on the curtain wall, and there's mullion pieces on the curtain wall. A lot of different things there. So as I point at any individual area, there might be some confusion about what I mean. Do you mean the whole wall? Do you mean the grid line? Do you mean the mullion? What is it that you're trying to change right now? So how that works is if you hover over something, that actually did a pretty good job. I can tell that it's actually choosing the grid wall or the grid line because down here in the status bar it's suggesting that's what it is. if I hover over this piece over here, it's a little more ambiguous. In fact, you'll see it's even there. I'm looking at the mullion. If I want to get rid of the grid line that's under there, what I can do is tab, got the whole wall, tab, now I got the grid line. But you might have to tab sequentially through that, and it will take you through different options. When you get the piece you want, if I want to get rid of that grid line, I select it, and then I can go ahead and take it out. So, let me do a different one. Let me first get this one. I'm going to I can tab to rotate through the different options. That's the panel. Let me get the grid line. And notice it's pinned right now. Why is it pinned? Because that was actually generated as part of the pattern. So I can unpin that. Now I can add or remove. Oh, come on, you. I got too much stuff going on here. Choose that line. Say add or remove. Choose that. Oh, come on. Why will you not do that for me? Because I know it's exactly what I wanted to do. Over here, get the grid. It says add or remove. It's unpinned. I should be able to grab that segment and just knock it out. Still not. I'm going to think about why that is in a second, because it's making a liar out of me. Let me kind of show it to you on this wall. If it's any consolation, and hopefully it is, like Revit fights with me all the time too. So, it's like, it's always a little battle. You sort of figure out what it is you want to get it to do, and eventually you beat it. But sometimes it takes a little work to do it. So what I want to try and show you, I'll just do it on this one, is that if you grab a grid line, you can say add or remove a segment, and then you should be able to actually just choose a chunk of the grid line. So I just got rid of that very top piece of the grid line. So over here, again, I can choose the grid line again, say remove a segment. Let me get rid of that bottom piece over there. So I can start editing them and kind of breaking out different parts that I want. So we can play a lot of games with grid lines to kind of create exactly the pattern we want in the mullions. But another sort of very cool thing you can do with curtain walls that probably gives you a little more power architecturally is to actually start playing around with the panels, not just the grid lines. So go ahead and create a pattern you like with the grid lines. Yes?
Are you able to get rid of grid lines without getting rid of mullions?
No. Yeah, so if there's a grid, a mullion can only live on the grid line.
Yeah.
So that's actually a good one. It's kind of like in the same way it's this notion of posted. If you get rid of a wall, it'll take out the windows that are attached to it. If you get rid of the grid line, it'll take out the mullions that are attached to it. So there's kind of a hierarchy of who owns who. Okay, let's talk about the panels, because we got all the different sort of grid lines and sort of mullions, and we can sort of play around with that and get it just to be where we want it to be. But these panels are actually the next thing I want to address, because by default, all these panels that are popping in, it's all a lot of clear glass. Okay, and that may be okay. But if you have a big old curtain wall system on some buildings, you don't want it to all be on glass. For example, if there's a restroom right behind this, or a kitchen, or some sort of service area, you may not want all that glass. You may want some opaque panels there, or some translucent panels that will let the light in but still block the view. A lot of things, even in panels like this, often the bottom part will be sort of opaque or translucent. So no one wants to look at the back of the desk. It has all the computer tables and, well, and a little modesty problem in terms of looking at the back of desks too. So it's kind of good to sort of go through and have like a little bit of opaqueness sometimes. So here's how we address that. Okay. All these panels that are floating around there, you actually have a choice. And you can change them one at a time, or we can do something a little more systematic. But we can go through and change their properties. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to hover over this wall for a second. I'm going to get over sort of one of the dividing lines. And what I'm going to do is just tab a few times. I'm going to tab once. That got the chain of walls. Tab again. Okay, that actually got the panel. It actually got the panel to the right side. If I tab again, I was going to guess that it was going to get the panel there. It got the panel to the left side. But this tabbing rotates you through the different options. when you get to the thing that you want to change, okay, select it. Notice it's pinned right now because it came out of that pattern. So I'm going to unpin it so I can change it. In fact, since it's pinned, you'll see that I can't change it over here in the type selector. It's kind of grayed out right now. So I can kind of look, but I can't actually touch it. So I'm going to unpin it. That'll give me the flexibility to go through and make some changes. Okay, now we can start playing. So, panels, let's see what's available. We got a glazed panel. We have something called a solid panel. Okay, make that solid and opaque. Not too bad. Try that again. We'll come over here somewhere, unpin that one, make that solid. Okay, I can get into this. In terms of the solid panel, you'll notice right now, oh, it's this kind of beautiful, gray, flat, relatively uninteresting material. And you may not want gray, flat, uninteresting materials all over your building. You might want granite or copper or some sort of translucent glass or something that's really cool. So what I'd like to be able to do is have panels, but not just have them gray, drab materials. Okay? So, okay. I want a panel, I want it to be pretty opaque, but I want it to be a different material. And the materiality is really just a parameter. Okay? So, if you've got things that are very similar to what you want, but you want to change one of the parameter values so you can choose between them, okay, how do we do that? We've been doing it a lot with other sort of objects. What you do is you go and grab the object, come on over here. Type selector doesn't have the type we want. What do? You can edit the type and duplicate it to make your own type. So in the same way that we can make new window sizes, make new floor types, you can make new types of panels. And this like it's kind of interesting because really what's happening is we're starting to develop a whole library full of my favorite things. I like copper panels. I'm going to make a copper panel type and put it in my library so I can use it in all my jobs from here on out. So here's how they do it. Solids, okay, you'll see solids are defined to this nice material called default. That's the kind of gray, drab, doesn't really have any materials properties, it's just some sort of solid surface. If you would like to go ahead and have some different panel types, what you do is you say duplicate. And oh, how about, I'm going to go through and make a nice solid blue panel. Okay. This is the definition right now. Notice it still has the default type, because that's just sort of a textual kind of description of it. If I want to change that material, here's what I do. I go to that default material, and materials are chosen. As opposed to typing in values, we go to this thing called the materials browser, and how we do that is that little dot, dot, dot right there. If you click on that little dot, 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 you get this thing called the materials browser. You can sort of see the materials that kind of available now. We got copper, we got wood, we got all sorts of materials in there. If you have one of the existing ones you want to use, you can choose that, like oak flooring if you want to put some sort of striped wood on the outside, stainless steel if you want to put something like that on there. If you want to create your own material, that's okay too. And how you would do that is, this is the list of all the materials. If you want to create a new one, down at the bottom there's a button that lets you add a material. So let's say I'm just going to create a new material. Oh, it's called default new material. That's not a very good name. I'm going to call this, panels blue, since that's what I was going to try and create. What does panel blue look like? Well, panel blue has some sort of appearance. It might have some sort of surface pattern. And what I'll do is just choose some nice blue color. Okay, I can just leave it a solid blue, or if I want to, I can give it some sort of a surface pattern. For example, in here, make it like 4.5 tiles. Actually, 8-inch tile. We'll make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's going to look like blue with that kind of grid pattern on it, like it's a tile. Okay. We're eventually also going to go with a render appearance. That's how it would actually show up when we render it and make a photographic one. But for right now, we've defined our own material, panels blue. Say OK. Say OK. Okay, and that's what a blue panel looks like. So Now that we have that, we can go through and change any panel we want to be blue. Let me grab that one. And since I've defined that new type, it's available. Okay, we can go through and create as many different panel types as we want to. Different stone, metals, wood, whatever it is you want to put in there. The panels also can be sort of translucent, so if you don't want like either clear glass or opaque, if you like the idea of kind of, translucent, light passes through, but maybe you can't see through it so easily. Again, what we'll do is just sort of choose one of the panels. We'll edit the type, and I'll create, how about like green translucent? So what's that going to look like? It's going to be very similar, but instead of being blue in this sense, let me again kind of create a new material. I'll rename it. We call it a green panel. Give it some color. If you like the idea of translucency, that's controlled right in here, transparency in this case. You can give it some degree of transparency, like 50% transparent or 100% transparent would be glass, or like purely clear. Make it about 50. So now I got a couple different panel types. I got green, I got blue. Let me just orbit that around a little so you can sort of see. Okay, so the blue is opaque, the green is transparent right now. But go ahead and create as many different panel types as you want. If you want to have some fantastic Mondrian-like surface with all these different panels and different types, knock yourself out. And like really, you can really get quite custom with the way these things are all set up. Again, the last thing we'll show you before we break is kind of based on a question we had at the first session this morning. Someone came up with a brilliant question. Hey, this is kind of okay, but is there a way, if I have a couple of different panel types, is there a way to kind of really quickly copy that over to other panels? So we'll have to go in and choose them and change the type, choose them and change the type, choose them and change the type. And there is. There's actually a tool which is all about that. It'll work for really any type of object, but what it does is it copies the type from an object and pastes that type onto another object. So it'll work with windows, it'll work with walls. If you have anything of a type and you want to copy the type over, here's how you do it. You go on in and it's under the Modify tab. I might have trouble seeing that just because my screen's kind of squishy. But it's this tool right here. It matches the type properties. So it kind of looks like a paintbrush. Okay. And what that does is as follows. You can choose it, and I never remember how to do this, so this is actually a good example of help in action where it'll tell me a little bit about the description. I can read that in terms of works with only one view, cannot match types between project views. Looks like you choose one, and it'll copy it over to the other one. Okay, I sort of get the idea. I'll say match the type properties. What it actually does also, pay attention down here in that little status bar. It will give you a help message that tells you sort of what it's looking for. So select an object that, to copy its type. So we're going to select the one that we're going to clone over to somewhere else. So for example, if I want to get that green translucent panel, I might have to tab to get it, but I got it right there. So now I can put it other places. So let's see if I can put it somewhere else. Select an object, click and empty. I'm trying to think. I think I lost it there. No, let me do it again. I don't know why I lost it. It might be because they're pinned. I'm trying to think about if that's going to be the issue. Let me do this, because the pinning is really kind of creating this thing where it may be blocking us. What I'm going to do is just choose them all and say unpin them all. I think that may give me the flexibility. Again, I'll try to get that green guy. I'll take it over here. There we go. I'll take it over there. So you can kind of quickly get things. Again, the problem I was having was because they were all pinned, it wasn't going to let me go through and change things because they were like pseudo locked. So the way I got rid of that was I just chose a whole bunch of objects and just said unpin them all. Again, that sort of opened them up temporarily. We could pin them back again later. So let us just pause there for a second. Again, copy it across if you want to, but let's do this. What happens when you come on back from break is we're going to talk about the last thing you need to know about curtain walls, and that is this. When it comes time to put doors in curtain walls, it's a little bit interesting about how you have to do it, because you're going to find out that in the curtain wall, a door isn't a door, a door is a type of panel. Okay, which is kind of a minute to think about. But it's one of those things that you need to know, and you'll run into it the first time you try and put a door in a curtain wall. So let's go ahead and break. Come on back in 10, and we'll pick up there. And then keep on marching down through our list.